With NBA draft season picking up, I wanted to share some things I've learned about the pre-draft process in my years covering it as a reporter and as a fan of the draft in general. It's honestly my favorite part of the job, and I pay really close attention to it. And over time, I've learned some lessons both through forming my own opinions about players and revisiting them years later, and also by asking those who actually scout the players for NBA teams. So I'd like to share this information in part to help fans out there, because I think fans will find some of it interesting, and it may even help them make more educated guesses as to which players will pan out and which ones won't. With that, here are 10 lessons I've learned about the NBA draft. The first is that high school recruiting rankings do not matter for the NBA. Go back and look at NBA drafts of the past, and then how those players were ranked coming out of high school just 1 year earlier. There's often very little correlation. Those lists are a very inexact science, and they're not even meant to predict the draft, yet I see people cite them all the time. If a guy was better as a high school senior than another player, but that other guy is better as a college freshman, 9 times out of 10, the second player is going to be the better one moving forward. A lot can change in a year, and just because a guy was a top 5 recruit doesn't mean he's going to be a high draft pick or even a good NBA player. It just doesn't work that way. The second is that vertical leap is an overrated skill. If you go back and look at the guys who jumped the highest at the draft combine, most of them not only aren't NBA stars, but didn't even stick around in the league. And if you really think about it, some of the best dunkers in the world aren't NBA players. Look up a guy named Jordan Kilgannon on YouTube. You'll see what I mean. He's unbelievable. And the best players in the NBA, by and large, aren't big leapers. Luka, Jokic, SGA, Steph, KD, Tatum, I could keep going. Guys like Anthony Edwards are exceptions to the rule. My theory on this relates to the NBA becoming more and more of a perimeter game, with the three-point shot being king. You used to have to play around the rim and ideally above it, but now you kind of don't. Third, the intangibles of a player and how they will operate as professionals is the great unknown. The teams know way more than we do about that kind of stuff. They do tons of research going back years, but even they don't truly know for certain. That's part of what makes the draft remain so unpredictable, is that the teams basically try to evaluate what 18 and 19-year-olds will be when they're 25, not only as basketball players, but as people too. And it's not easy, especially when there's so much money involved. Number 4 is I would advise fans to watch interviews with players. You can't get the whole picture just by looking at a player's film on YouTube or by studying the numbers. It helps to get a sense of who they are, and you can get a small glimpse of that in interviews. The 2 things I'd suggest looking for are how they describe the game and how they answer questions about their weaknesses. You can pick up on how they think the game and their basketball IQ by how they talk about basketball. And then the most competitive players sometimes show that edge when they're asked about their biggest criticisms. I've interviewed hundreds of draft prospects at the combine and pre-draft workouts. And my takeaways haven't always been proven right, but some really stuck with me. Tyrese Halliburton and Cason Wallace, for example, you could just tell they were competitive based on how they answered questions about their supposed weaknesses. Dyson Daniels came across as very serious and professional, far more mature than your average 19-year-old. And I remember Jalen Brunson striking me at the time as one of the most quietly confident people I'd ever met. It was like he just knew he was going to be good. Number 5, fit is important, but not in a traditional sense. I see fans sometimes say like, oh, this team can't draft that guy because they already have X player. If you're picking high in the draft, position doesn't really matter because you're a bad team that doesn't have enough talent to be picky. Also, it's smart to just go best player available and figure it out later, so you don't pass on a star for a regular rotation player. But fit is very important for the player in terms of opportunity, meaning their role and how much they play early on. It helps if the guy who is drafted fills a need and fits the overall play style of that team. Number 6 is defense is hard to evaluate, but I once got a great tip from an NBA scout. He said the best thing to watch for with perimeter players is straight line drives. If someone is driving on them, do they create enough resistance to push them off their path, or do they allow a straight line to the rim? That's the one simple way to project whether they can defend in the NBA. Number 7 is height, length, and speed are hard to detect sometimes by watching players on video. That's why whenever a top draft prospect comes through the DC area, I try to go see them play in person. Conversely, I've seen some guys get drafted who I did not see in person at the college level, who immediately, when I saw them on the court in the summer league, I could tell they either weren't big enough or fast enough to play their position, and that spelled trouble. Number 8 is shooting can be taught, but not all players are equal in that regard. A lot of players can develop their outside shot, but there is a big difference in shooting off the catch and off the dribble. Shot creation is harder to teach, and it seems like most of the guys who become really good at it in the NBA show signs of doing that at an early age. Also, some players are more worth taking the chance they learn how to shoot than others. If a guy doesn't have the size or athleticism to be a star, then they might top out as a role player even if they develop a 3. Number 9 is that every draft class has stars. Some draft classes are better than others, but on average, there are 5.4 All-Stars in every NBA draft per my research. So just keep that in mind when you hear people say a draft class is below or above average. Even the down years have major difference makers. The best example would be 2013, which was a bad draft overall, but still produced Giannis and Rudy Gobert. And finally, the number 1 pick is rarely the best player in the draft. I did some research last summer on this and found that in 20 drafts from 2000 to 2020, the number 1 pick was the most valuable player in their class only 10% of the time. It happened twice, LeBron James and Karl Anthony Towns. LeBron is LeBron, but even Big Cat didn't guarantee the Timberwolves would be contenders. The takeaways there would be that the draft is really hard to predict. And also, draft order can sometimes be overrated. If you get the 2nd, 3rd, 4th pick, the best player in the draft is very likely to still be on the board. So I hope you enjoyed this. Keep it all in mind as you watch the prospects leading up to the draft. And make sure you subscribe to my YouTube page for more content like this.